broad political trends is Russia and Ukraine is heading for a stalemate, basically because neither party can afford to give up. Ukraine, for obvious reasons, will not give up because they want their country back. Russia, for pure reasons of pride, cannot end the war. So unless Europe and America or friends like India and Israel and France actually try to bring out a kind of solution, which seems unlikely at this point, it is going to head towards a perpetual war. You remember, Europe is famous for these wars. The Treaty of Westphalia, which states went into war repeatedly against each other. The 30, 40 years they were going on war. While this may not last 30, 40 years, but what will happen is whenever it comes to either a stalemate or a close, we will find that Russia, now that it's been established, power cannot win a war on the ground when there is a strong local resistance to it. It is likely to become a military equivalent of a North Korea. It is a military superpower with a veto in the in the Security Council, but it is now going to be a much diminished power, which will be heavily dependent on China for sustenance in many ways and for markets. Of course, India will also remain a friend, but Russia's scope and size will actually diminish at the end of the war. So Ukraine will gain gradually, but Europe does not have the will to rebuild it, which means billions and billions of dollars of relief have to be given to Ukraine to rebuild itself. So it's a long 10, 15-year process. So it's not actually very useful even for them to continue the war. It's best for them to agree to a limited ceasefire, start rebuilding before things go out of control. So as a result of this war, what will happen is Germany and Japan have realized that a war in Europe cannot be won by America, it will have to be won by themselves. And Japan knows that the war or Chinese belligerence cannot be won by support from America, because America is not going to send troops to help Japan. Or just they did that in South Korea and South Vietnam, but they will not do this anymore, as the Ukraine thing showed, and as their terrible withdrawal from Afghanistan showed. America does not have any more appetite for war. What it will do, it will keep financing wars so that its own military industrial complex is in good shape. It will, however, become a tilting factor in all major wars. So if there is something happening in India and China, US is likely to come a little more quietly on our side, but it will not do anything more than help us with more ammunition and things like that. So all this, if we manage our geopolitics, our friendships, and our economy well, we should become a 5 trillion economy in another 3 years or 4 years. That is in fiscal 26-27. That is, we are likely to become a $5 trillion economy, but it could happen earlier because a lot depends. When you talk of the economy in dollar terms, everything depends on the exchange rate. If the rupee, for example, goes up to 75 rupees, suddenly a 5 trillion will come faster. If it goes to 95, then that 5 trillion will take longer. So we should not actually set our goals in dollar terms. We should set in terms of the constant rupee, and that is where we need to do. So the next, right? Thanks. Next slide, please.
Yeah, we are on the next slide, sir.
Yeah. So a lot of changes are going to happen in the global economy, and especially with big tech, because everybody, Elon Musk has taken over Twitter. Facebook is going through large trouble. Apple is also going to face headwinds because I think half their production has to be shifted out of China. They all became, many of these guys were, Apple especially and Google were becoming $2 trillion companies. They are now lost quite a bit of the thing. And there is a lot of anger among ordinary Americans that these companies have become far too big and far too powerful for this thing. Europe already knows it, but Europe doesn't have the equivalent of a Google or a Amazon or this thing. So most probably the process to break these companies up will begin now in 2023. It may take 4 or 5 years before these companies agree to change and downsize, but they'll have to split, just like America split AT&T or the oil monopolies before the Second World War.